Okay, we are just going to jump right in. And I have a little story to begin. When I was at Groupon, there was an entire consumer insights department. So I was on the growth marketing team, and there was thousands of people at this organization, huge company. There was a substantial team for consumer insights. Smart people, deep research, genuinely interesting findings. They had built out these detailed personas that included demographics and purchase profile and what they care about and how these people make decisions and their doubts and all this stuff, like really deep, real depth there. Meanwhile, I was on the growth marketing team building out customer lifecycle emails. So we were sending a lot of emails, and maybe you get these emails even today. 4 per day. We would be sending emails based on your last purchase, emails with Groupons that were trending, seasonal emails, win back emails, forgot something in your cart emails, you name it, we send it. But not one email mapped back to what the consumer insights team had actually learned about our consumers. The research was sitting in a deck somewhere. The emails were going out anyway. And these were two teams at the same company. And it was like zero connection. And so for a long time, I couldn't figure out why. Like they seemed to be doing everything right. They had the surveys, they had the interviews, they had the patterns, they were synthesizing the information, making beautiful charts and beautiful decks, but nothing changed. No decisions got made differently. No positioning shifted. The research just sat there. And so that's when I realized, and just kind of looking back, I started thinking about this, those were actually not research insights. It was information. It was really interesting information, but those two things are not the same thing. What they were producing was really cool. It wasn't useless, but it just was not decision grade information. So then I started thinking, what is an insight? And came to the conclusion that an insight has to be something you learn that changes how your entire company goes to market. An insight is something you learn that changes how your entire company goes to market. I won't repeat that again because you probably don't want me to. Maybe I will. An insight is something you learn that changes how your entire company goes to market. Not, oh, that's so interesting to know. Not, oh, that's really good for the deck. It changes how your entire company goes to market. And I think that by that definition, most things that we call insights are not actually insights. So what is an insight? What does a real insight look like? First, I think it's causal. It explains why someone changed their behavior, not what they liked, not what they preferred, what actually changed their behavior, what moved them. And this is why buyer research is not the same thing as customer research, because your buyers haven't bought yet. They haven't moved to purchase. So when you're downloading your Gong sales calls and calling that research, and we're doing buyer research, that's actually not going to get you to any insights, right? So first, it's causal. Second, it's specific. It couldn't apply to any other company. The buyer conversations you're having with prospects are similar to the buyer conversations your competitors are having with prospects. It's not specific to you. And again, that's why getting, the data from those Gong calls and calling it research and calling it insights, it's not going to work because it's not specific. Third, it's usually surprising, not necessarily shocking, but I did not expect that. That's really surprising, right? Third, it's surprising. And fourth, it's emotionally loaded. I think this is the most important and interesting one. So there's relief under there, there's fear, there's pride, there's something with weight that reflects the human condition. And this is something that in B2B, we tend to ignore. And this has been the case forever because we're always complaining how, why marketers are talking about features over, the real transformation, the real value that the buyer got, the customer got. Let's talk about B2C for a second, because I think that there are some really cool examples that'll just bring it home around what these emotionally loaded insights actually look like. So for example, do you remember Dove? They had this campaign. Real beauty sketches is what they called it. So the human truth was self-judgment. The campaign was around like empathy-led storytelling. And the business impact was that there was brand and value growth. Let's talk about that like in depth. The insight was women often judge their own appearance more harshly than others do. And Dove used that emotional gap as the center of those real beauty sketches. So their marketing, instead of leading with the product claims, which we love to do in B2B, Dove dramatized the human truth in a film format, right? And so people loved that. They're sharing, they're discussing it. And the business impact is actually the film became the most watched online video campaign at the time and got a lot of earned attention and helped drive renewed brand relevance and value growth for Dove. And the payoff came because the campaign made Dove feel emotionally useful, not just cosmetically useful. Another example, and I love this one. This was shared with me, Pedigree. So the human truth was loss of innocence in modern life. The campaign is called Feed the Good, and the business impact, global sales lift. So the insight that they found was dogs matter not just because people love them, but because their innocence helps us reconnect with our own. It's both a scientific truth that dogs positively affect human well-being. If you have a dog, then you know what I'm talking about. And it's a cultural truth too. Adults become more jaded, judgmental, and disconnected over time. I mean, yeah, kinda. And so the marketing move, they had the campaign that turned that insight into Feed the Good, which shows dogs helping people overcome emotionally loaded situations. For example, bullying, race tension, gang violence, self-esteem struggles, things like that. And that gave Pedigree a clear role of not just feeding dogs, but feeding the goodness that dogs bring out in people. I love this one. And so the business impact, the campaign gave Pedigree a clear and singular meaning and identity globally, with 2 films that ranked top 50 most emotional ads of the year. And more importantly, there was an average of 10% sales increase 3 months post-launch across the launch markets with double-digit growth in the US. So this isn't just like, oh, that was so great. It was wonderful. It felt so good. It actually impacts the business as well. And you can see the difference in B2C. I think that like I can give you more examples. These are easy to find. In B2B, less so. And I think it's because we don't know what a real insight looks like. It's not something that there are the tools that we have out there to help us find that, or the researchers, I guess, may not know what to look for when they're looking for these insights. So let's talk about tools. Here's what most research tools get wrong, and I've used tools. They give you patterns. They give you things that come up multiple times. They give you keywords. They even give you quotes to back it up, and then they call that an insight. But the problem is frequency is not causation. So just because 5 customers said it saves time, your tool saves time, doesn't mean time saving is what caused them to buy. It means that 5 customers gave you the easiest possible answer to your question. It sounds like an insight, but it contains 0 useful information because, as we talked about, what is a real insight? It's causal, specific, surprising, and it's emotionally loaded. And so that's not what easy to use is, right? And a lot of times folks don't even dig for the deeper meaning. It saves time. Okay, time doing what? Which part? What were you doing before that took longer? What specifically changed? And most research conversations never get there. And a lot of conversations you're feeding into these tools to find insights, those are not even research conversations. They're sales conversations. So try feeding AI your call transcripts, right? And you'll find that they give you dozens of insights without anything to back it up other than pattern recognition and quotes. Just do it. Just try it. Just because something came up multiple times doesn't necessarily make it a decision insight. And yet this is how companies today are making decisions. And that is crazy to me. Is it crazy to you? Like, can we connect on this, please, if it is? So I built something that goes beyond surface level patterns, and I'm calling it Aha PMM. Aha PMM finds, organizes, and scores the insights buried in your customer and prospect conversations, and that changes how your entire company goes to market. Here's how I'm just going to give you an overview. It starts by mapping the 4 forces behind every purchase before looking for a single insight. So before any insight is looked for, we're going to talk about the 4 forces behind every purchase. Push. Number 1, push. What made the old way unbearable? Number 2, pull. What outcome the person was imagining? Number 3, anxiety or fear. What almost stopped them? Number 4, habit. What they had to give up. Anxiety and habit are where the real stuff lives because customers don't typically volunteer those. So you really have to probe. You have to be an experienced researcher to really go that deep. Then it looks at how the interview was conducted, which is not happening today. Nobody checks, like, was that an actual customer research interview and how did it go? And did the interviewer probe past the surface answer? Did they lead the witness? Did they stop at easy to use, or did they go 3 levels deeper until they got to something causal? And if not, there's a flag. There's a flag so we know, right, that it's not enough and we need to do more. Because bad data produces misleading insights, and that's worse than no data, in my opinion. I wonder how many of the gong calls you're using as research would actually pass this flag. I really do wonder. I almost want you to send me your transcripts so I can run it through this tool. All right, then Aha PMM classifies what kind of insight you're actually looking at. There are 10 types, including value perception gap, real job to be done, and the unexpected outcome. The one everyone overlooks is actually emotional transformation. When the product didn't just change the workflow, it changed who the person is at work, their identity or their role, which it's clear that that's a completely different level and different message than saves time, for example. And finally, it scores the insight. So I've created a way, which I've actually always wanted to do, is like when you take your qualitative conversations, how can you quantify what happened within those conversations? And so scoring the insight across 6 dimensions, including strategic impact and uniqueness, and there's 30 points maximum. That score is what lets you walk into a meeting and say, the score is 28 out of 30. That's why we're leading with this, because customers told us, and that is a high score, and here's why, and how, getting deep into that scoring, which is really exciting because I've never been able to do that. It's always kind of been in my head. So let's bring it home. Most teams don't need more research. They need a better standard for what actually matters. Quotes are useful, patterns are useful, but neither one is an insight on its own, right? An insight earns the name when it changes a decision, when it sharpens the message, when it shifts the story, when it changes how you go to market. And we talked about those awesome examples from the B2C world. And I'm always looking at that, like, what can we learn outside of B2B? Because there are a lot of bad practices going on in B2B. So when it changes how you go to market, that's a decision insight. And it's honestly the only kind worth digging for. Everything else is just going to be more information that is, like what I told you in my story, sitting in a deck somewhere. So if you're curious about what all this looks like, you want to kind of see a little bit about, Aha PMM, what it looks like, check out the article. I'm going to link to it in the show notes. And if you want to try it out, I've been doing this with folks, like, just give me a few transcripts. I'll run it through the tool and we'll look to see what the scoring comes out to be and what all the information is. So reach out with any questions. I'm on LinkedIn. You can email me, Anna@firmanovmarketing.com. I would love to hear from you, and thanks for listening.